Zara walked through the glass doors of the Interstellar Integration Center, her silver-blue skin catching the morning light streaming through the windows. The building buzzed with activity as beings from different planets gathered in small groups, their various languages creating a symphony of alien sounds. She found her usual spot in the corner of the main hall, a small table where she could watch everyone without being noticed. This had become her daily routine for the past 6 months since arriving on Earth. Every morning, she would sit here with a cup of synthetic coffee, hoping that today might be different. But it never was. Across the room, she spotted 2 males. From her home planet, Kepler 442b. Her heart skipped a beat, the way it always did when she saw someone from her world. Maybe today they would notice her. Maybe today they would remember her from back home and come over to talk. Instead, they were deep in conversation with a group of tall, elegant beings from Proxima Centauri. The males from her planet had their backs turned to her completely, as if she didn't exist at all. It was the same treatment she had received back home, and apparently, even 50 light years away from her birth planet, nothing had changed. Zara sipped her coffee and tried to focus on the datapad in front of her. She worked as a translator for the Integration Center, helping newly arrived aliens understand Earth's complex paperwork system. It was good work, important work, but it also meant she spent most of her time dealing with other people's problems. While her own loneliness grew deeper each day, a burst of laughter caught her attention. The group across the room was now joined by several Earth humans, and everyone seemed to be having a wonderful time. She watched as one of the males from her planet placed his hand gently on a human woman's shoulder, making her laugh even harder. The sight made Zara's stomach twist with a familiar pain. Back on Kepler 442b, she had watched similar scenes countless times. Males from her species were always drawn to the tall, graceful females with perfectly symmetrical features and flowing movements. Zara, with her shorter stature and what her people considered ordinary looks, had always been invisible. She remembered the last social gathering she had attended on her home planet before the Great Evacuation. She had spent weeks preparing, choosing the perfect outfit, and practicing conversation topics in her mirror. When she arrived at the event, she had stood near the refreshment table for 3 hours, watching everyone pair off for traditional courtship dances. Not one person had approached her. Not one. The memory still stung, even now. She had left that gathering early, walking home alone under the 2 moons of her world, wondering what was wrong with her. Why didn't anyone see her as desirable? Why was she always overlooked? Now, sitting in this Earth building, watching the same pattern repeat itself, she felt that familiar heaviness in her chest. The males from her planet had found new partners among the humans and other alien species, but they still didn't see her. She might as well have been invisible. Zara glanced around the room at all the different species mingling together. There were beings with multiple arms sharing jokes with humans, creatures covered in colorful fur playing games with Earth children, and tall, luminescent beings teaching humans their traditional songs. Everyone seemed to belong somewhere, with someone, everyone, except her. She finished her coffee and gathered her things. There was no point in staying longer. Her work shift would start soon, and she had a full day of helping other aliens navigate their new lives on Earth. The irony wasn't lost on her that she spent 8 hours a day helping others integrate into their new world while she remained, completely alone in hers. As she stood to leave, she heard one of the males from her planet speaking in their native language to his human companion. "Earth females are so different from our own," he was saying. "They have such interesting features, much more fascinating than what we're used to back home." His words hit her like a physical blow. Even here, surrounded by entirely new species and possibilities, she was still considered uninteresting. Still ordinary. Still not worth a second glance. Zara walked quickly toward the exit, keeping her eyes down to avoid making contact with anyone. She had learned long ago that looking hopeful only led to disappointment. Better to expect nothing than to be hurt again. The afternoon sun felt warm on her skin as she stepped outside, but it did nothing to chase away the cold feeling in her heart. She had 30 minutes before her shift started, just enough time to walk to her small apartment and change into her work clothes. Her apartment was in a building specifically designed for alien residents, with adjustable lighting and temperature, controls to accommodate different species' needs. It was practical and safe, but it felt more like a temporary shelter than a home. She had barely decorated it, not seeing the point when she had no friends to invite over and no romantic partner to impress. Zara stood in front of her mirror, looking at her reflection with critical eyes. Her amber-colored eyes were too large for her face, according to Kepler 442b standards. Her silver-blue skin had subtle patterns that were considered common rather than exotic. Her build was compact and strong, designed for her planet's higher gravity, but here on Earth, it just made her feel short and unremarkable. She had tried to understand what made other beings attractive to her species. She had studied the females who caught everyone's attention, trying to figure out what they had that she lacked. But no amount of analysis had helped her change what she was born with. Sometimes she wondered if leaving her home planet had been a mistake. At least there she had understood the rules of rejection. Here on Earth, she was learning new ways to feel inadequate every single day. But she couldn't go back. None of them could. Their planet's environment had collapsed, making it uninhabitable. Earth had opened its doors to refugees from her world, offering them a chance at a new life. She should feel grateful, and she did. But gratitude couldn't fill the empty space in her heart where connection should have been. As she changed into her work uniform, Zara made the same promise to herself that she made every day. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow she would try harder to connect with someone. Tomorrow she would find the courage to approach others instead of waiting to be approached. But deep down, she knew tomorrow would probably be just like today. And the day after that would be the same as well. She was destined to be alone, and no amount of hoping was going to change that simple, painful truth. The little coffee shop on Elm Street had become Zara's favorite hiding place. It sat just 2 blocks away from the integration center, tucked between a bookstore and a flower shop. The owner had painted the walls a warm cream color, and soft. Jazz music always played in the background. Most importantly, it was usually quiet, with only a few regular customers who minded their own business. Zara had discovered this place 3 weeks ago when she needed somewhere to escape the busy atmosphere of the integration center during her lunch break. The barista, a human male in his early 30s, had been working behind the counter that first day. He had brown hair that always looked slightly messy, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and hands that moved with careful precision when he made drinks. What struck her most about him was how he treated every customer exactly the same way. Whether they were human, alien, tall, short, young, or old, he gave each person the same genuine smile and asked about their day with real interest. She had watched him serve a grumpy businessman, a chattering group of college students, and an elderly woman with her service dog, treating each interaction as if it mattered. That first day, when Zara had approached the counter, she had expected the usual polite but distant service she received everywhere else. Instead, the barista had looked directly at her face, not at her unusual skin or large eyes, and asked what he could make for her. "I don't know much about Earth coffee," she had admitted, feeling awkward. "What do you recommend?" Instead of suggesting the cheapest item or rushing her along, he had taken time to ask about her taste preferences. Did she like sweet things, strong flavors, warm or cold drinks? He had listened to her answers and prepared something special, a vanilla latte with a hint of cinnamon that had tasted like comfort in a cup. Now, 3 weeks later, she came here every day during her lunch break. She always ordered the same drink, not because she didn't want to try new things, but because she loved watching him remember her preferences. It was such a small thing, but it meant everything to someone who was used to being forgotten. Today felt different somehow. The coffee shop was busier than usual, and her regular table by the window was occupied by a young couple sharing a piece of cake. Zara stood near the door, holding her order, unsure where to sit. All the other tables were either taken or had, people's belongings scattered across them. "Hey!" came a familiar voice behind her. She turned to find the barista wiping his hands on his apron, looking at her with that same kind expression she had grown to appreciate. "Your usual spot is taken today. Would you like to sit at the counter? I can move some things around to make space." Zara felt her cheeks warm with surprise. In all her visits, they had never had a real conversation beyond her order. She had assumed he was just being professionally polite, the way service workers were trained to be. But now he was going out of his way to make sure she had somewhere comfortable to sit. "That's very kind," she said, following him to the counter. "But I don't want to cause trouble." "No trouble at all," he replied, quickly clearing away some supplies and wiping down the counter surface. "I actually prefer having company while I work. Gets lonely back here sometimes." He pulled out a tall stool for her, and she settled onto it carefully. From this angle, she could watch him work while they talked. His movements were smooth and practiced, like a dancer who had performed the same routine thousands of times, but still found joy in it. "I'm David, by the way," he said, extending his hand for a shake. "I know we've never properly introduced ourselves, but I see you here every day and realized I didn't even know your name." "Zara," she replied, shaking his hand. His grip was warm and firm, lasting just long enough to feel genuine without being awkward. "Zara," he repeated, as if testing how it sounded. "That's a beautiful name. Is it from your home planet?" Most people, when they asked about her background, wanted to hear exotic stories about alien worlds and strange customs. They treated her like a walking museum exhibit, fascinating but not quite real. David's question felt different. He seemed genuinely interested in her as a person, not as a curiosity. "Yes," she said. "It means bright star in our language. My parents hoped I would shine brightly in life." She laughed softly, but there was sadness in it. "I'm not sure I've lived up to their expectations." David paused in his coffee making and looked at her seriously. "I think you're shining just fine. Sometimes we can't see our own light because we're too focused on everyone else's." His words caught her off guard. She had expected him to change the subject or offer some polite but meaningless encouragement. Instead, he had said something that felt true and important. "Do you really think that?" she asked, surprised by her own boldness in continuing the conversation. "I do," he said, returning to his work, but keeping his attention on her. "I've been watching you come in here for weeks, and I've noticed things. You're always patient with other customers, even when they're rude. You clean up after yourself without being asked. You tip well even though you don't have to. You read books while you drink your coffee. Real books, not just scrolling on a device. Those might seem like small things, but they tell me a lot about who you are." Zara felt something strange happening in her chest, a warm, spreading feeling she hadn't experienced in years. Someone had been watching her, not with judgment or pity, but with appreciation. Someone had noticed her kindness, her habits, her choices, and found them worth remembering. "I never realized anyone was paying attention," she said quietly. "The right people always pay attention," David replied. "Sometimes it just takes a while for our paths to cross with theirs." They talked for the rest of her lunch break, and Zara found herself sharing more than she had planned. She told him about her work at the Integration Center, about the challenges of learning Earth customs, about her love of books and quiet places. David listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions and sharing his own stories about working in the coffee shop and his dream of someday traveling to see the ocean. When it was time for her to return to work, Zara felt reluctant to leave. The conversation had been the highlight of her entire week, maybe her entire month. "Same time tomorrow?" David asked as she gathered her things. "Same time tomorrow," she confirmed, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she had something to look forward to. As she walked back to the integration center, Zara caught her reflection in a store window. She looked the same as always, but something felt different. Maybe it was just her imagination, but she thought she could see a tiny spark of something new in her eyes. Maybe David was right. Maybe she had been shining all along and she just needed someone to point it out. 2 weeks had passed since Zara and David started having their daily conversations at the coffee shop counter. What began as polite small talk had grown into something she looked forward to more than anything else in her day. She found herself hurrying through her morning work just so she could get to lunch break faster. Today felt different from the moment she walked into the shop. David was wiping down tables instead of working behind the counter, and when he saw her, his face lit up with a smile that made her heart skip. "Perfect timing," he said, hanging up his cleaning cloth. "I was just about to take my break. Would you like to try something different today? There's a place I've been wanting to show you." Zara felt a flutter of nervousness mixed with excitement. In all their conversations, they had never left the safe space of the coffee shop. "What kind of place?" "The Botanical Gardens on 5th Street. They have plants from all over the world, including some that were donated by other planets. I thought, you might enjoy seeing something that reminds you of home." The idea both thrilled and terrified her. Walking somewhere together felt like crossing a line from friendly conversation into something more personal. But the way David looked at her, hopeful and genuine, made it impossible to say no. "I would like that," she said, surprised by how much she meant it. The gardens were only a 10-minute walk from the coffee shop, but to Zara, it felt like entering a completely different world. The moment they passed through the entrance gates, she was surrounded by colors and scents that took her breath away. Earth plants were so different from those on her home planet, yet somehow they felt familiar and comforting. David led her down a winding path lined with flowering bushes. "I come here sometimes when work gets stressful," he explained. "There's something about being around growing things that makes everything feel more manageable." They walked slowly, stopping frequently, so David could point out his favorite plants, or so Zara could examine something that caught her eye. She found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't experienced since arriving on Earth. There were no crowds here, no one staring at her unusual appearance, just peaceful paths and the gentle sound of water from hidden fountains. "Tell me about the plants on your world," David said as they settled on a bench beside a small pond. "Were they very different from these?" For a moment, Zara hesitated. Talking about her home planet usually brought up painful memories of everything she had lost. But something about the quiet garden setting and David's patient expression made her want to share. "Very different," she began slowly. "Most of our plants glowed softly at night because our sun wasn't very strong. We had these trees that grew in spirals reaching up toward the light, and their leaves would change colors based on the seasons. During the rainy months, they would turn deep blue and purple. In the dry season, they became gold and silver." David listened with complete attention, occasionally asking questions that showed he was genuinely interested, not just being polite. "That sounds incredibly beautiful. Do you miss it?" "Every day," Zara admitted. "But I try not to think about it too much. Missing something you can never have again only makes the present moment harder to bear." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching small fish swim in the pond. Zara found herself studying David's profile, noticing the way he seemed, completely at peace in this quiet place. Most people she had met on Earth were always rushing somewhere, always checking their phones or talking loudly. David moved through the world at a gentler pace, paying attention to small details that others missed. "Can I ask you something?" she said finally. "Of course." "Why are you being so kind to me? I mean, truly kind, not just polite. Most people are friendly enough, but they keep their distance. You seem different." David turned to face her fully, his expression serious but warm. "You want an honest answer?" She nodded. "Because I recognize something in you that I see in myself," he said. "I've always been the person who notices things others miss. The shy kid in the corner, the employee, who works hard but never gets recognition, the flower growing in a crack in the sidewalk that everyone steps around. I guess I've learned to look for beauty in unexpected places." Zara felt her cheeks warm. "You think I'm beautiful?" "I think you're remarkable," David said simply. "You're intelligent and thoughtful and kind. You notice things too. You remember when I mention my grandmother is sick, and you ask about her the next day. You tip extra when you see I'm having a busy morning. You're considerate in ways that most people aren't anymore." No one had ever described her this way before. On her home planet, she had been average at best, forgettable at worst. Here was this human, someone who could choose to spend time with anyone, telling her that he found her remarkable. "I don't feel remarkable," she said quietly. "Most days I feel invisible." "Maybe that's because you've been around people who don't know how to see," David suggested. "Sometimes the most beautiful things are overlooked because they don't demand attention. They just exist quietly, making the world better by being in it." As they walked back toward the coffee shop, Zara noticed that other people in the gardens looked at her differently when she was with David. Instead of the curious stares or polite avoidance she usually encountered, people seemed to see her as part of a pair, as someone who belonged. But as they approached the main path near the entrance, her stomach dropped. Standing near the fountain were 3 beings from her home planet, 2 males and a female. They were part of a group that frequented the integration center, and Zara knew they had never thought much of her back home. She instinctively slowed her pace, hoping they wouldn't notice her, but it was too late. One of the males, Kyle, looked up and spotted her immediately. His eyes traveled from her face to David walking beside her, and she saw something change in his expression. "Zara?" Kyle called out, his voice carrying across the garden. "Is that really you?" She had no choice but to approach them, David staying close beside her. "Hello, Kale. Nira. Jex. We heard you were on Earth, but we haven't seen you around much," Nira said, her tone polite but cool. Her eyes kept flicking to David with obvious curiosity. "I stay busy with work," Zara replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "And who is this?" Jex asked, looking David up and down in a way that made Zara uncomfortable. "This is David," she said. "David. These are some people from my home planet." David stepped forward with his usual friendly demeanor, extending his hand. "Nice to meet you all. Zara's told me a lot about her world. It sounds like an amazing place." The 3 exchanged glances that Zara knew all too well. It was the same look they used to give each other back home when they encountered something they found amusing or pathetic. "How interesting," Kale said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Well, Zara, it's good to see you're settling into Earth life." After they walked away, Zara felt the familiar weight of shame settling on her shoulders. She could imagine what they were thinking, what they would say to others back at the integration center. Poor Zara, so desperate for attention that she'll take it from anyone, even a human who doesn't know any better. "They seemed nice," David said, though she could hear the uncertainty in his voice. "They were just being polite," Zara replied, but her mood had shifted completely. The magical feeling of the afternoon was gone, replaced by all her old insecurities. As they reached the coffee shop, David touched her arm gently. "Hey, are you okay? You seem upset." Zara forced a smile. "I'm fine. Just tired. I should probably get back to work. But as she walked away, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had made a terrible mistake. For a few wonderful hours, she had allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, someone could see her as worth caring about. Now, she wondered if she was just fooling herself again. The days following their encounter at the botanical gardens felt like walking through fog for Zara. She continued her daily visits to David's coffee shop, but something had shifted inside her. The easy conversations they once shared now felt forced on her part, weighed down by doubts that grew stronger each day. David noticed the change immediately. Where she once lingered at the counter, chatting freely about her day, now she ordered quickly and found excuses to sit at a table instead. When he tried to engage her in conversation, her responses were polite but distant. The spark that had been growing between them seemed to dim a little more each day. 3 days after the garden visit, Zara's worst fears were confirmed in the most painful way possible. She was eating lunch alone at the integration center, trying to focus on a report she needed to finish, when she heard familiar voices at the table behind her. Nira and another female from her planet, Lyra, were speaking, in their native language, probably assuming no one nearby would understand them. "Did you see Zara with that human the other day?" Nira was saying, her tone dripping with amusement. "The one from the gardens?" "Yes, how desperate can someone get?" Lyra replied with a laugh. "I almost felt sorry for her." Zara's hand tightened around her eating utensil, but she forced herself to remain still, to keep listening. "The poor human probably has no idea what attractive females from our species actually look like," Nira continued. "He's settling for her because he doesn't know any better. It's actually quite sad. Do you think she's told him how no one back home ever wanted her? How she used to sit alone at every social gathering, hoping someone would notice her?" Lyra's voice was cruel with false sympathy. "At least here she found someone naive enough to give her attention." "It won't last," Nira said confidently. "Once he meets some of the really beautiful females from our world, he'll realize what he's missing. Humans are just like our males. They want the best they can get." Zara felt sick to her stomach. Every word they spoke echoed the thoughts that had been spinning in her mind since seeing them at the gardens. She had been fooling herself, hadn't she? David was kind to her because he didn't know better, not because she was actually worth caring about. She gathered her things quietly and slipped away before they could notice her, but their words followed her like a dark cloud for the rest of the day. That evening, Zara sat in her small apartment, staring out the window at the Earth City lights. For weeks, she had allowed herself to believe that maybe things could be different here. Maybe she could find someone who saw value in her. But Nira and Lyra were right. She was just the same unwanted person she had always been, in a different place. When she went to the coffee shop the next day, she could barely meet David's eyes. "Your usual?" he asked with his customary smile, but she could see the concern in his expression. "Actually, just a regular coffee today?" "Black," she said, avoiding his gaze. David paused in his movements. "Are you sure? You've never ordered black coffee before." "I'm trying new things," she replied, though the words felt hollow. He prepared her drink without further comment, but she could feel him watching her as she found a seat at the furthest table from the counter. She pulled out her data pad and pretended to work, but the words on the screen might as well have been written in a foreign language. After a few minutes, David appeared at her table with a small plate. "Fresh-baked cookies," he said, setting them down. "On the house." "That's not necessary," Zara said, still not looking up. "Zara." His voice was gentle but firm. "What's wrong? You've been different all week, and I'm worried about you." The kindness in his voice almost broke her resolve. She wanted so badly to tell him everything, to let him comfort her fears away. But Nira's words echoed in her mind, naive enough to Give her attention. I'm fine, she lied. Just busy with work. David didn't move away. Instead, he sat down across from her, something he had never done before in the shop. Look at me, please, he said quietly. Reluctantly, Zara raised her eyes to meet his. The concern she saw there made her chest ache. I don't know what happened, but ever since we went to the gardens, you've been pulling away from me. Did I do something wrong? Say something that hurt you? The genuine worry in his voice made everything worse. How could she tell him that the problem wasn't him, but her? That she was exactly the pathetic, desperate person that Nira had described? You didn't do anything wrong, she said finally. I just think maybe we should keep things more professional. You're very kind, but I don't want to take up your time. David's expression changed, confusion mixing with hurt. Take up my time? Zara, spending time with you has been the best part of my days. I thought you felt the same way. You don't understand, Zara said, her voice barely above a whisper. You don't know what you're getting involved with. Then help me understand, David said, leaning forward. Talk to me. What's really going on? For a moment, Zara wavered. The urge to pour out everything, her loneliness, her insecurities, her fear that she wasn't worth loving, was almost overwhelming. But then she imagined David's face when he learned the truth about her, when he realized how completely ordinary and unwanted she really was. I have to go, she said abruptly, standing up and gathering her things. Zara, wait! But she was already walking toward the door, moving as quickly as she could without running. She heard David call her name once more, but she didn't turn around. That night, Zara lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of their conversation. The hurt in David's eyes haunted her, but she told herself it was better this way. Better to end things now, before he discovered the truth about her and rejected her the way everyone else had. She had protected herself from further heartbreak, hadn't she? So why did she feel more broken than ever? The next morning, Zara took a different route to work, one that didn't pass by the coffee shop. She packed her own lunch and ate at her desk, avoiding the integration center's common areas where she might run into Nira or the others. But around noon, her supervisor appeared at her workstation. There's someone here to see you, he said. A human male. He says it's important. Zara's heart jumped. David. He had come to find her. She walked to the front desk with trembling hands, and there he was, holding a familiar cup with her usual order and looking more determined than she had ever seen him. We need to talk, he said simply. And this time, I'm not letting you run away. David stood in the Integration Center lobby, holding Zara's favorite coffee like a peace offering, his usually calm demeanor replaced by quiet determination. Other beings moved around them, but his focus was entirely on her face, reading the surprise and conflict in her amber eyes. Please, he said softly. 5 minutes, that's all I'm asking. Zara glanced around at her co-workers and the various aliens passing through the lobby. This felt too public, too exposed. There's a quiet garden area behind the building, she said. Finally. We can talk there. They walked in silence through the corridors and out the back door. The garden was small but peaceful, with benches arranged around a fountain that provided gentle background noise. David waited until they were seated before speaking. I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday, he began, setting the coffee cup between them on the bench. And I realized that I've been approaching this all wrong. I've been trying to convince you that I care about you, but I haven't been listening to why you're afraid to believe it. Zara stared down at her hands. David, you don't understand what you're dealing with. You don't know who I really am. Then, tell me, he said. Help me understand. The words sat heavy between them for a long moment. Zara had never told anyone the full truth about her past, about the years of rejection and loneliness that had shaped her into someone who expected to be overlooked. Back on my home planet, she began slowly, I was nothing special. I was the girl who sat alone at gatherings, who never got chosen for dances, who watched everyone else pair off while I remained invisible. For years, I told myself it didn't matter, that I didn't need anyone. But it did matter. It mattered so much that when I came to Earth, I promised myself I wouldn't put myself in that position again. David listened without interrupting, his expression growing more understanding with each word. When we started talking, when you were kind to me, I wanted so badly to believe it was real. But then I saw those people from my planet at the gardens, and I remembered who I really am. I heard them talking about me yesterday. They said you're only interested in me because you don't know what attractive females from my species look like. They said you're settling for me because you don't know any better. The words tumbled out faster now, years of pain and insecurity, flowing freely. And they're right, aren't they? If you had seen the females back on my world, the ones who were truly beautiful and graceful and desirable, you wouldn't look twice at me. I'm just ordinary, forgettable, the kind of person who gets left behind. When she finally looked up, she expected to see understanding in David's eyes, maybe even relief that she had saved him from making a mistake. Instead, she saw something that looked like anger. Those people, he said, his voice tight with controlled emotion, don't know anything about beauty, and they certainly don't know anything about me. He turned to face her fully on the bench. Zara, I need to tell you something about myself, something I don't usually share with people. She waited, confused by the intensity in his voice. I grew up being the weird kid, the one who collected rocks instead of playing sports, who preferred books to parties, who got excited about things other people found boring. In high school, I dated a girl who spent 2 years trying to change everything about me. She wanted me to be more outgoing, more conventional, more like the popular guys she really wanted to be with. David paused, running his hand through his hair. It took me years to realize that the problem wasn't that I was weird or different. The problem was that I was trying to be loved by people who couldn't see my value. When I finally stopped trying to fit into spaces where I didn't belong, I started finding people who appreciated exactly who I was. He reached for her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. Do you want to know what I see when I look at you? He asked. I see someone who reads books in coffee shops because she genuinely loves learning. I see someone who remembers small details about other people's lives because she truly cares. I see someone who works hard to help other beings navigate a new world, even when she's struggling to find her own place in it. Zara felt tears starting to form, but David wasn't finished. I see someone who's been told she's ordinary by people who wouldn't recognize extraordinary if it was sitting right in front of them. And yes, I see someone beautiful, but not in the way those people from your planet define beauty. I see someone beautiful in ways that matter, in ways that last. But what if they're right? Zara whispered. What if you're just settling for me because— Stop, David said firmly. Listen to me carefully. I've met other beings from your planet. I've seen the ones they probably consider beautiful, and you know what? They didn't make me want to know their favorite books or learn about their dreams or figure out how to make them smile. You did that. Only you. He squeezed her hand gently. I'm not settling for you, Zara. I'm choosing you. There's a difference. They sat in silence for several minutes, the fountain's gentle bubbling filling the space between them. Zara felt something shifting inside her chest, like a wall that had been built brick by brick over years of hurt finally beginning to crack. I'm scared, she admitted finally. I'm scared of believing you and then finding out I was wrong again. That's okay, David said. Being scared doesn't mean you can't also be brave. And I'm not asking you to believe me all at once. I'm just asking you to give us a chance to find out what this could be. 6 months later, Zara stood in front of the bathroom mirror in her apartment, getting ready for the Integration Center's annual cultural celebration. But this time, she wasn't getting ready alone. Do you need help with that? David called from the bedroom, where he was struggling with the formal Earth attire he had chosen to wear to honor her culture. I think I've got it, she called back, adjusting the traditional garment she had ordered specially for the occasion. It was the first time since leaving her planet that she had worn clothing from her homeworld, and it felt like reclaiming a part of herself she had lost. When she emerged from the bathroom, David stopped mid-struggle with his tie and stared at her. Wow, he said softly. You look incredible. You don't look so bad yourself, she replied, walking over to help him with his tie. They had been together long enough now that these small, intimate gestures felt natural, comfortable. The celebration was in full swing when they arrived at the integration center. Beings from dozens of planets mingled together, sharing food, music, and stories from their home worlds. Zara felt a familiar flutter of nervousness as they entered the main hall, but this time it was different. This time, she wasn't alone. As they moved through the crowd, she spotted familiar faces. There was Kyle, talking animatedly with a group of humans. There was Nira, wearing an elaborate dress that would have intimidated Zara in the past. But now, with David's hand warm in hers, she felt something she had never experienced before at a social gathering. She felt like she belonged. "Zara!" a voice called out, and she turned to see a young female from her planet approaching nervously. Her name was Tess, and Zara recognized her as one of the newer arrivals. "I was hoping to see you tonight," Tess said, her voice shy. "I wanted to thank you for the advice you gave me last month about finding work here. The job at the library has been perfect for me." David squeezed Zara's hand encouragingly as she smiled at the younger woman. Over the past few months, as her own confidence had grown, Zara had found herself becoming the person she had needed when she first arrived on Earth. Young aliens struggling with integration often sought her out, knowing she would understand their challenges. "I'm so glad it worked out," Zara replied. "How are you settling in otherwise?" As they talked, Zara noticed Nira watching them from across the room. For a moment, their eyes met, and Zara felt a flicker of her old insecurity. But then David's thumb brushed across her knuckles, a gentle reminder of his presence, and the feeling passed. Later that evening, as the celebration wound down, David and Zara found themselves on the building's rooftop, looking out over the lights of the city. "Can I tell you something?" Zara said, leaning against the railing. "Always. For the first time since I arrived on Earth, I felt truly happy tonight. Not just content or grateful, but genuinely happy." David moved to stand behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "What changed?" Zara leaned back against his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "I stopped waiting for permission to be happy. I stopped waiting for other people to tell me I was worth something. I realized that the only person whose opinion actually matters is my own, and the people who truly love me." "And do you?" David asked softly. "Love yourself, I mean?" Zara thought about the question seriously. 6 months ago, the answer would have been an immediate no. But now, seeing herself through David's eyes, helping other young aliens find their way, building a life that felt authentic and meaningful, she could honestly say yes. "I'm learning to," she said. "Every day I'm learning to see myself the way you see me. The way I deserve to be seen." David pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "That's all any of us can do. Learn to love ourselves as much as we're loved by others." As they stood there together, surrounded by the quiet sounds of the Earth City at night, Zara realized that she had found something she had never expected to find. Not just love from another person, but the